Hi, our guest today is Patrick Holland, who's running for a seat on the Board of Selectmen.
Welcome.
Pat, welcome.
Oh, well, thank you very much for having me. If I don't seem like myself today, let me apologize. I've been in Milford Hospital since 1 o'clock this morning. My wife gave birth.
Oh, you're a father.
To the newest member of our family, my third child.
Well, congratulations.
Declan George Holland, so we're very proud. Everybody's healthy, everybody's happy, but I'm very tired.
I can imagine.
And so you dared to show up.
You had to make all the phone calls.
Text messages now.
That's...
The first one was phone calls, now it's text messages.
Well, given that, here's the standard question. Why are you running for the Board of Selectmen?
To get out of the hospital, maybe, no.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, it is nice to be out of the hospital, although I am going back there directly as soon as we're done here. But the reason why I'm running, I've served 6 years now on the school committee, including 1 year as chairman. And public service is very important to me for no other reason than I love this town and I want to have an opportunity to make a difference. And the reason why I'm running now is I've become very concerned at what's happening with sort of our downtown area, our Main Street area. I think that when I was younger, our Main Street was a place where the community would gather. There would be sidewalk sales. There was a reason for children to go downtown after school. There were music stores and joke shops and pharmacies and places where you could buy candy. There used to be a movie theater. And that's been sort of slowly going away, throughout my adult life. I'd say my adult life is probably the last, 17 to 19 years. And I think that it's taken away a sense of our community, and I think one of the first ways to start building back that sense of community is trying to find a way to breathe a more vibrant energy into our downtown area. It really upsets me when we see so much economic development happening on the periphery of our town, and we see very little of it focused on our Main Street area. And I think that we can do a better job putting together a long-term development plan for that area, and I think that we can find ways to induce businesses to want to open up shop there. And I think that we can make it sort of a very vibrant and vital place, and there are lots of paradigms for it. I mean, there are a lot of communities around us that have sort of very vibrant or revitalized downtowns. Marlborough is an example of a town that's recently been revitalized downtown, and Natick is another example where they have enormous economic development happening on the periphery of their town, but it hasn't killed Main Street.
Well, I'll give you a real life case study. A few episodes ago, we had on a woman who lives in town, Maureen Fabry, who's going to open a microbrewery in town.
Absolutely, Maureen's terrific.
And she's looking for a location right now, and I said, Main Street would be great, and she said, not enough parking.
Right.
She's wiped it off her list of search places, which is, to me, a tragedy, because I think it would be a great thing to bring people to Main Street. What do you tell somebody like that?
Well, so I spent 14 years working in retail marketing and development, and so I either consulted with or worked for large corporations that chiefly distributed their products through independent retailers. And so I've spent a lot of time finding ways to help independent retailers be successful, helping them find locations and turning their business ideas into multi-generational businesses. At least that's the goal. And when you have an area like downtown, and you have the parking problems that we have, and we most assuredly have a parking problem downtown, you have a lot of difficulty luring the right businesses in along Main Street. If you look at how larger corporations, whether they be a chain or whether it's a company that looks to fund an independently owned business, they do an analysis and they look at the urbanicity of the town. Is it more like a city? Is it more like a town? They look at income, certainly. Parking is always very, very high on that list. And it's a big problem downtown, lack of parking, and it's one that's gotten worse.
Even with the 3 lots?
Yeah, even with the 3 lots. If you've ever visited those lots, I went down, I took my daughter to the Music and Arts Building on Main Street. I had to buy guitar strings. And we parked behind it. It was actually the first time I'd parked back there in a while. Now, admittedly, there were some snowbanks, so there were some spots that were used up because of snowbanks, but it was very difficult to park a car there. It was very difficult to park a car on Main Street as well, and on the other side of Main Street, that municipal lot is always full. It's something that we have to find a way to fix.
Okay, now that leads me to a second question, which is, given the fact that the current board is looking at bringing bus service, are you in favor or against that, or think it needs more study?
In general, I am a huge proponent of public transportation. I think that there are several members of our community that would be particularly well served by having a bus route in town. I think, first of all, Milford Hospital would be a huge beneficiary of public transportation. I also think that people who have developmental disabilities, who have graduated from the school system and need to find a job, they would be able to travel across town and be able to get to and from work, and I think that would be great. Right. I also think that the elderly would benefit enormously from a bus system, but we have to be very careful in how we craft it. First, in how we pay for it, which is important, but also in how that service works in our community. So recently we had an open forum, right, where the bus transport, the MWRTA, right. I always make a mistake, MWRTA came in and they spoke to the town, and it was a very good presentation. It was a comprehensive presentation, but in the presentation they offered different ideas. And so there was no plan. You couldn't put a pin in a single plan, and I'll give you an example of what I mean. So they said, when addressing the bus system for Milford, they could do it in several ways. They could have a bus that exclusively ran a loop through Milford, or they could have a bus that started in Framingham and came through the Ashland and Holliston and then ran through Milford. So, I mean, we have to find a way to craft
there isn't
that.
A final plan yet because
Right.
they were actually trying to find out what people wanted at that
Right.
hearing.
Right.
There will be one eventually.
Right, absolutely. And when we have an opportunity to vet that final plan, I hope that it's going to be a plan that's going to serve our community in the way that it needs to.
Okay.
Well, I'm a firm believer in, I partly grew up in a community that had bus transportation. And
As did I.
And I remember taking it every place, downtown, uptown, took it to public transportation to school, high school. So there's a lot of benefits to public transportation. And that Milford is one of the few communities, as large as it is, that doesn't have it. All the other communities around
Right.
have it, which would indicate to me that will also go to the issue that you mentioned first, is revitalizing downtown, because it now gives people access to downtown that currently have to walk around. Because of urban spread, now this gives people the ability to get back into the center of town and community. And there's also another issue that's been run around 17 or 19 or 20 times, and that's allowing some high-end apartments or that kind of stuff above the buildings that are downtown. What do you think about that?
I think that we need to look at all solutions that are potential fixes for what's ailing our downtown area. If you speak to people who work in real estate, they tell you that if we find ways to thoughtfully craft the way those buildings need to be renovated so we can have mixed-use buildings up there, that we could be very successful. And I think if you look in a lot of communities, my wife is from upstate New York, and so we travel out there, and Global Foundries built an enormous microprocessor factory in the middle of nowhere in upstate New York, in Malta. And a lot of the building that's been springing up around there has been that sort of mixed-use retail, so sort of high-end residences built above retail spaces. And it works quite well, but it's also zoned very carefully. And so I think, like anything else, you need a plan, and you need to work towards that plan, and the plan needs to be comprehensive, but it needs to be vetted by members of the community. So when we're working towards something, the result is predictable. I think if you don't have that plan, you can't just change one zoning rule and say, now we can do this and hope that it's going to work out.
Well, the dilemma is like Mashpee or other places that have done the same thing, or Westboro's another example. They started from ground zero where there wasn't anything there. Right. Milford offers it's a different situation because you have the structures there, and it's not a short-term, okay, let's build something. You're going to have to model it, remodel it. There's going to be a lot of things that go on, and so it doesn't happen overnight or in a 2-year plan.
I pointed out in a column about a year ago, just before we go on to the next question, the reason I know that nobody's serious about revitalizing downtown is you can't name any one person in town government in charge of it.
Sure.
Good point.
Yeah, so there was, we
had... to me, I'm just offering this as my comment. Should you get elected and you want to pursue that and the rest of the board agrees, you have to put somebody in charge of it. There is no one person or entity in charge of that right now that you can point to. Years ago, you could point to Sue Clark when she was in charge of the Community Development Block Grant Program, and at least say, Sue's running the downtown fairs and things like that. There's nobody now.
No, I mean, that's absolutely true. I mean, we have so many pieces to our community that really have a lot to offer. I mean, we have the bike trail, which is wonderful. We have a newly dredged pond, which is fantastic. We have a farmer's market. We have all of these properties with a lot of potential, and we have no one organizing these properties under one comprehensive scheme. And I think, honestly...
Or promoting them.
Or promoting them in the right way. And Sue Clark did a great job when she was writing grants. But again, when you're writing grants, you need to be building towards something. There needs to be an overreaching scheme. There needs to be a plan in place that's put together by interested members of the community, a long-term development plan that says, how do these pieces fit together to get to the goal that we want? Not how can we fix some of these things so they're better, how can we fix some of these things so they're better and they're working towards our final goal? And we need to have an organization in town that is putting those different pieces together. And I think it does more than just organize people in our community. It gives more members of the community a chance to participate in those activities, to participate in the community, and it brings us all closer together. It makes us more like the Milford, quite frankly, that I grew up in.
And that I remember very well.
Yeah.
Switching gears, I know when you announced for the selectman's position, you said you weren't running against anybody but for the position. Even with that said, though, you do have an opponent. He is a veteran in the job. What would you do either different, or in fact, I'd even use the word better, or in a different manner than he does?
You know, so I firmly believe that the seats that our elected officials sit in don't belong to those officials. I sit on the school committee. I don't consider it to be my seat. I consider it to be the seat that the people of Milford allow me to sit in. And I feel that, especially on the community level, when you're looking at town government, you know, we're not career politicians. I mean, these aren't the things that we do for a living. We're people who care about the community and have ideas about the ways that we can make the community a better place. And I think for a long time, we've talked about the financial success of Milford. And the financial success of Milford is a wonderful thing. As a member of the school department, I have a lot of visibility on teachers who want to come from Franklin and work in Milford, because Franklin has to pink slip 25% of their staff every year. Now, they hire most of them back. That's true, because they find the money somewhere.
Well, they go through the budget dance every year, which we don't have enough money.
Right.
You have to, by contract, lay them off.
Yeah, that's
Then you
that's
have to,
part
by
of the law.
contract, bring them back.
Yeah, that's
Right.
the law. You have to.
So-
you don't have a choice.
So in the town of Milford, we don't have to pink slip 25% of our staff, because we manage our town in a way that allows us to be, we are financially responsible in such a way that we don't have to do those things. And so financial strength is very important, but it's not the only thing. I mean, what good is a community that is financially very strong that can't retain its citizens, that people don't want to live in because they don't feel that sense of community as strongly as maybe they do in some other community in town? And so I think that my focus is on community and in helping to bring the people of the community back together by sort of revitalizing our main street, by getting our community properties to work together, so we're all working towards a common goal to really give Milford back that sort of small New England town feel. It's funny, I always joke that, you know, Milford is the biggest small town I've ever lived in, you know, and you see how many people know each other's names and know each other's families, and have just grown up here for so long. And I don't want that to go away. I don't want this to be a place where people merely live. I want this to be a place where the community engages, and quite frankly, I don't think that there's anyone on the Board of Selectmen that's talking about that right now.
Okay.
What's the first thing you do if you were elected?
So the first thing I would do is I would put together a group that could start working on our long-term development plan. I think that's probably the first key. I think springing from that would probably be a community development office or some sort of a community use office, more than what the school does with the community use office. I know Len Marcone does an amazing job with community use, and they have wonderful, wonderful programs.
He does a
But
great
that's
job.
not a business development position.
Exactly right.
That's more of, you know, after-school sports education.
Yeah.
Right.
But he does a great job.
But what he does is he organizes different elements of the community, and he fills all of those holes where Milford has need, especially Milford students.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think that we can do much the same on the town level with a municipal office that is organizing many of those things. But I think that a lot of this would spring from the group, the committee, and, you know, whatever the committee is named, and if I'm so lucky as to win the support of the citizens of Milford, and I can get the other selectmen to buy in to what this plan would be. I mean, whatever the name happens to be, whether it's the Long Range Development Committee or it's the Community Use Development Committee, whatever that committee is, it needs to be people who are invested in our community, who have a breadth of experiences, whether they be in real estate or in retail or in town planning, to help put these pieces together.
Isn't that generally something that comes under the responsibilities of the planning board, to come up with long-term community plans?
Yeah, you know, I think one thing that I have noticed, and it happens quite a bit, and I'm not pointing fingers at the planning board, and I'm not saying they should do anything more different, but sometimes you get stuck in this idea of, well, that's how we've always done it. And so I think we need to sort of break that, well, that's how we've always done it type idea, and put everything on the table. I think that we have a lot of zoning ordinances. We have a lot of ways that we incentivize businesses or could incentivize businesses. And we need to put all of that on the table. I think putting it, putting it on one group of people to say, oh, by the way, now this is also your job, I think that's unfair. I think putting together a group of people and saying, if you're willing, this is a big job. It's going to take us 10 years to fix it. Are you willing to commit that kind of time? I think that's a fair ask as long as they know what they're getting themselves into.
Long-term planning.
Oh, it needs to be long-term.
I'll just point this out to you. You probably don't know it, but since you mentioned Marlboro before, about 3 or 4 years ago, Marlboro came out with a new master plan that was predicated on one goal. And the goal was, we don't want the tax rate or the tax bill of residential homeowners to rise over the next 20 years. And they backed it backwards from that goal. And said, in order to do that over the 20-year period, we need this much commercial space, this much industrial / manufacturing space. Then they went back a step and said, what laws do we have in place that are hindering this?
Exactly.
And then looked at those.
Or bureaucracy, processes, and changed them to the point where they are extraordinarily competitively going out to meet that goal. It's their master plan. Their master plan is to have another park. It's, we want this much square foot of manufacturing industrial, this much square feet of commercial over 20 years, and they're doing everything they can to get it.
Absolutely.
And steal it away from towns like Milford.
And that knowledge is out there. There's no reason why a long-range plan couldn't be put together like that. I mean, most corporations function at the very minimum of a 3-year plan, so they're looking out 3 years ahead. Many work on 5-year plans. I think with municipalities, things move more slowly. We don't have an opportunity. We're not driven by profits. We're driven by quality of life, and so it can't be a 3 or 5-year plan. It needs to be a 10 or 15-year plan, within which there are 3 and 5-year benchmarks. And so if you look at sort of the revitalization that's happening in Marlboro, I mean, they have a beautiful parking structure there that people can park in now. They have a lot of restaurants that people can shop in, and I think that they really did craft a good program that is paying out benefits. Now, will it ultimately be successful? I don't know. I certainly hope it. I certainly hope it is, and I certainly hope that we can be even more successful than that here in Milford.
Okay. Well, I've got one question I have to ask. I've been sitting at the Board of Selectmen meetings for, I think I'm in my 8th or 9th straight year.
Right.
A lot of people have told me they're very comfortable that you had a Brian Murray, Dino DeBartolomeus majority and a Bill Buckland minority.
Right.
Then after the last year's election, they were very comfortable having a quasi-Buckley, Will Kincaid majority and a Brian Murray minority because there's balance in both situations.
Right.
They have the same people who've said to me, they worry that if you're elected, there'll be no balance and you'll have a 3-0 majority that will run rampant doing whatever it wants. How do you address a rumor like that?
It's funny. I've heard that as well. I mean, first and foremost, I'm an independent thinker. I'm a person who has a business experience that no one else on the board currently has. I think that anyone who is concerned primarily with how political theater plays out on the Board of Selectmen, I guess I would encourage them to think a little bit about where they want Milford to be. And so not to think about, well, how the board has functioned in the past and what has happened in the past, but think more about Milford's future and who has the best ideas, the newest ideas, and the potentially most successful ideas to drive Milford forward. I don't go into anything trying to play some sort of a political game. I have an agenda of trying to make Milford a better place to live. Now, I certainly know that, I mean, I've been friends with Will Kincaid for my entire life, and I've been friends with members of the Finance Committee for my entire life, and I've been friends with members of the Zoning Board for the majority of my life. So, I mean, it's not like we don't know each other. I mean, we all know each other.
And you come from a family that's been involved. I mean, for those who may not know, I mean, your father was on the school committee.
Yeah. My father served for 9 years in the school committee. Back in the 70s, my mother was a retired school teacher from the town of Milford. My sister is a school teacher in the town of Milford. My aunt is a retired school teacher in the town of Milford. My cousin is a school teacher in the town of Milford. I mean, my family's been in this town for a long time.
And your uncle used to be in the State House.
My uncle was a longtime senator, represented Milford in Boston.
So you're it's a political family. So
I like the term political theater. I love that. That's really
that is true.
Good description. Good description.
Going to the selectmen's meeting and say, who's going to say what tonight? Set this off.
I think if you've seen me speak at the school committee meetings, I'm very direct, very sincere. It's not about the theater. It's not about playing a game of gotcha. It's about expressing my opinion because I believe that that's what I was elected to do. I was elected by the people of Milford to speak my mind, and so long as they agree with what I say, then they will continue to re-elect me. And if they don't, then they'll throw me out. And so I'm really less concerned with, with sort of that political theater that plays out on the Board of Selectmen. Now, if I am so lucky as to win the support of the citizens of Milford and become elected to the Board of Selectmen, if Will and Bill agree with me 100% of the time, I think that's a great thing. And I think if you look at what's happening on the Board of Selectmen, and I don't know what the exact numbers are, but just like the school committee, I mean, the number of unanimous votes are overwhelmingly greater than the number of contested votes.
If you actually run down the votes, there are very few where there's a difference of opinion.
Right.
That may or may not be a good thing.
It may or may not, but what happens is usually you have some theater and outbursts or I would call a heavy discussion.
Right.
If you want to put terms on it, on issues there are disagreement. In this case, it just tends to get a little bit of a hard tone by one or two of the selectmen.
As long as we're disagreeing about ideas, right, then I think disagreement is great. If we're disagreeing for the sake of disagreeing because we think that that's what our constituents want.
Right, and if you say black, I have to say white.
Right, and I don't think that's good. That's theater, and I don't think that's good. I don't think the town government is better for that. I think if we're disagreeing over ideas, then the town government is better for that.
Well, that's called democracy.
Yeah.
That's the way it's supposed to work. You're supposed to.
There's an old saying at the Mendon town meeting, which is you can disagree without being disagreeable.
Right. And I think that's a critical thing that at selectmen level and school committee level is very important that you articulate your position without being obnoxious about it.
Right. When all is said and done, you need the three guys to at least cooperate with each other enough to move the town forward.
Yeah. Well, I think your obligation as an elected official is to have an opinion on something.
Yeah.
And if asked what your opinion is by a constituent, you have an obligation to tell them, and you have an obligation to give them a reason why you think that way. But be open to changing that opinion if you hear a compelling argument. Yeah. If you follow those rules, you can't go wrong. I mean, that's what I believe.
My rule is, Al and I, as you know, are both past selectmen in our towns, and my role is always the people that support you probably won't tell you. You'll hear from the people that don't like what you're
that's
doing.
That's a fact.
Well, that's it.
You'll hear vocally from the people who don't like what you're doing, but the people who support you probably won't say anything at all.
Yeah.
And you can't get jaded by that.
Yeah. Yeah, and you have to suffer the criticism. I mean, if
it goes with the job.
If you put your name on a ballot, then it's your responsibility to listen to the concerns who elected you, whether they voted for you or not. And I think that at the level of I've learned a certain measure of diplomacy on the school committee that I didn't carry into the school committee with me. And I think one thing that I've learned is, even when I disagree, it's very important for me to understand my fellow elected official's opinion. And once I understand it, if I continue to disagree with it, that's okay. But also, I can't be afraid to change my opinion based upon new facts introduced to me.
Right. That's the compelling part. You have if you hear a compelling argument, you have to be flexible enough to say, okay, that makes sense to me. Maybe I can revisit it.
This isn't the 19,000 Republican candidates jostling to get down to the one for presidential candidate.
Right.
And if somebody changes their opinion, they have 16 people looking at videotapes around the clock to say, you changed your position, or I was for that before, I was against it, and then I'm for it. In reality, people grow and change. They learn new facts, they grow and change. There's nothing wrong with having a different opinion a year into a discussion on something than you did at the beginning if you learn something that makes you change your mind.
I think it's funny, that's how so many people on sort of a national political level, they can't speak about their opinion because they are so closely allied with the other people who sort of make their jobs possible. They get very concerned with protecting their jobs, and that kind of discourse, that kind of behavior just has no business in town politics, because you're dealing with your neighbors. You're dealing with decisions that have a direct impact on the people that you know and love, and so you can't be so close-minded.
I used to tell that to George Peterson when he was in office. I used to kid him about it. I said, the last place, the highest level of town official that has to look his constituents in the eye every day is a selectman. I said, as soon as you go to the State House, they're an abstract concept, but a selectman has to look daily into his constituents' face and answer them eye to eye. And I said, that makes it tough.
You're going to get stopped in Shaw's or Stop and Shop or whatever supermarket you stop at, and somebody's going to go, I was watching the meeting on cable, or I read an article in the paper, and here's what I think you ought to do. And you got to be able to say, fine, and I agree with you or disagree with you.
For me, it's always Hannaford.
Okay.
I don't know why it's always Hannaford.
And the other thing that's going to happen is people are going to say, when you talk to your husband, you're going to say this to your wife, you're going to talk to your husband. And the best advice that was ever given to my wife was from Selectman Bates's wife, Betty Bates. She said, when anybody says you need to ask your husband about this, her response is always, that's his job, not mine. We don't talk politics.
But I don't know, you've obviously been an elected, you've been an elected board for 6 years already, so you know what goes with the territory of being an elected official.
Yeah.
And I mean, everybody's going to call you up for everything from potholes to streetlights, whether you're in charge of it or not. What they want is just an answer.
Yeah.
They're going to complain. People are going to call you up, and it's going to be fun. You're going to have, if you get elected, it will be fun. Having been on the school committee, you've probably gotten those calls from all the kindergarten moms that show up and say, gee, why don't we have this and why don't we have that, and it's not fair.
And my son got cut from the sports team. Can you do something about that?
Yeah, bus routes. I get a lot of calls about bus routes. Which and I take all of those very seriously. And I think a lot of it, whether I can help to create a solution to the problem or not, I think that the important part, and at least what I've always heard back from constituents, is that at least I reply to the email or I return the phone call, and I'm there to listen, and I do care about the concerns. I mean, quite frankly, we're all in this together.
Yeah.
And I would hope that people think that I'm available. I publish I maintain a landline in Milford, so I'm in the phone book so people can call me at home, and I encourage them to do so. I wish they called me more often, quite frankly.
Well, my first response when anybody called me at home when I was a selectman was, let me check the voter registration. I'm sorry, you're not on that, so please call me when you're registered. Maybe that's a terrible attitude. But I have this thing about, if you haven't got the wherewithal to stand up and go vote, then go talk to somebody else. That's a terrible attitude, perhaps, but.
Well, I'm trying to think. We got a couple of moments left. What would you like to tell the voters before we wrap this up?
Yeah, I think that we've done a lot of really wonderful things here in town. I've had an opportunity to not only serve in the school committee, but work on the Woodling School Building Committee. That is when it opens, is going to be the largest elementary school in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. That's a building with a $62 million budget that has been on time and slightly under budget since the moment I first presented the feasibility study article at town meeting. I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud of the work that I've done on the school committee. I'm proud of the people that I've had an opportunity to serve with. I'm proud of the things that I've learned about myself while doing it. And I would like to take some of that knowledge and some of that information and bring it up to the next level. There are only so many things that you can work on the school committee. And I'd like to take the experience that I've gotten both in my personal life, my professional life, and in my public life, and use those to make Milford a better place. And that's really why I want to run for selectman. I just want new ideas, and I would really like the voters to think about this as an election of ideas, not as an election about politics or politicians, because we're not professional politicians, we're just citizens.
Okay. Well, two things. One is congratulations on becoming a father again.
Thank you very much.
And second of all, good luck on April 5th.
Thank you.